Today I'm making a video on how to fuse urethane belting. This particular piece is 1 inch wide by 88 thousandths thick and is amazingly strong, actually. What's needed, of course, is to fuse this end to that end of the belt, and I made a simple jig here in my Bridgeport mill to hold the belting and allow it to slide together when I go to fuse it. And I also made a simple flag of 1/8 inch steel that I'm going to heat up. That's going to be the piece of iron that heats the edges of the belting to fusing temperature. From what I've read, the proper temperature on that is someplace around 400 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. That can vary by the actual belting itself, I guess. But what I think is probably worth noting is that I have seen some videos where people are heating their iron up to red hot and then using that close to red hot to fuse the belting. And from what I understand from the manufacturer's websites, that can result in a fusion, all right, but the belt won't be as strong there as it would be if proper temperatures were used. I'm going to be doing this job by myself, and so I wanted to figure out a way to manage the heating iron here in the simplest way I could think of. And of course, it would be easy to take a little piece of iron like this, steel, and just weld it onto a round shaft. That was my first impression, but I wanted to do this in a way that didn't assume people had welding capability and was as basic as possible. So I just took a piece of 1/8 by, I think that's 2.5 or so steel, and just cut it into a flag shape, and then simply put the stem up in the chuck there. And then I did put the brake on the mill so that holds this pretty close to straight across. Doesn't have to be absolute, you just have to have enough material to make a good joint. And I've let the material hang out here, I'd say about 1/16 of an inch on each side, so that should be enough material to push together and make a good fusion joint. The next obvious question is, well, how do you know when you're around 400 to 500 degrees? There's two ways that I'm going to try to use to determine that. And one is to use my infrared heat gun here. And the second is just simply knowing that steel tends to change colors based on its temperature. And when it turns a kind of bluish color, it's up in that 400, 450 range. So we'll take it up there. And then the next question we're going to answer here is, well, how quickly does it cool down? Say I get it up to 550, and then I want to manipulate the flag down and push the pieces together. Has it cooled off too much by then? And that's a good question that I think we should try to answer. So before we go ahead and try to do the fusion, I'm going to put the second piece of belting in this little portion of the jig. And you can see I cut that groove so that it kind of snaps in there and holds it. And then I just put this little piece of 1/8 inch steel on top, and then use this small clamp to clamp the whole works together so that it's secure. It'll take me a moment to run that clamp down here. Sorry about that. Put it on there. Good. And all that does is just keeps the belt lined up nicely, ensures that there's not going to be some kink in the belt when I put it together. So now we've got it set up so that these two pieces can slide together but are guided by the top of the vise. The pieces are supported on parallels, as you can see underneath. And what I'll do is I'll heat that flag up like so. Push the ends up against the hot flag until they melt, and then move the flag up and push the ends together. I think we're ready to go ahead and do our heat. It's going to be a little bit tricky to know where we are. I'm going to use an infrared gun to give me some clue. I just know I don't need to be red hot. That reads about 600 degrees. So we'll figure that's hot enough, and I'll just watch it cool back down a little bit. Now it's about someplace in the 550, 600 range. I'm going to let it cool down just a bit more. I'm actually blowing on it to hurry that up. I used the heavier steel, the 1/8 inch steel, so that it wouldn't cool off too quickly. But it looks like we're getting down in that 500 range now, so let's see what happens. Let's push the flag down, push the two pieces together, and you can see that they have melted up. We'll pull the flag up, push the two pieces together, and then the key is to leave them pushed together for a few minutes so that the material has a chance to cool. One of the common failures, evidently, is that people don't let it sit long enough. And I think the amount of time there that's supposed to elapse is around 5 minutes. So we'll take a break here for a moment. Well, I've waited the required 5 minutes. Let's see what we've got. Pop that off. Pop this one off. And you can see that we've got a nice straight splice, no kinking either direction. There is, as expected and to some extent required, some flash here, and we'll trim that off with a good sharp knife. I'll get that set up and we'll do that in a moment, but that looks like a really good strong joint. I'm pulling on it pretty hard there, probably 40 or so pounds. And it's doing just fine. We'll test a little bit more in a little bit. So I've got a box knife here that I sharpened up nicely on a piece of 1500 grit wet and dry paper. And I'm just sliding it right along the surface and trying to slit that flash off. Doesn't seem like it's very hard to do. There's that. There we go. See if we can get this last little bit. Yeah. And we'll come down along the edge here. There. Along the edge here. Flip her over. Got the exact same thing. And I really like the looks of that joint. It's so nice and uniform. I've used these urethane belts on fractional motors before. This one's going on a 1/2 horse motor. And the belts are remarkably durable, have good coefficient of friction so they don't slip, and last a long time. The one that I made probably 10 years ago is still just fine. So I went ahead and finished slitting off the flash, and then I used my belt sander to take off the last little bit of flash so that you can feel the joint, but barely. And one thing that I have never been read or know for sure is true, but seems sensible to me, is that if you bend your joint through an arc like this and it makes a sharp turn, that probably indicates a weak joint. But if it's a nice uniform bend, that indicates a well-fused material. And I thought it might be fun to just test and see how much force that belt can take. So I've got this Let's go ahead and test that as best we can. I've got this hand scale on there. There's about 100 pounds, and that's about all I'm good for on that. And you can see that it held up to that without any difficulty. I don't think that belt's ever going to be subjected to that kind of force in actual use. Here's a similar belt set up on a motor driving a spindle. And this makes a very nice arrangement, as it belt is very smooth and contributes no vibration.